Grace Harper took pride in her work. At 27, she was part of the Tesla assembly line at the Fremont factory, ensuring each electric vehicle met the company's high standards. The days were long and physically demanding, standing for hours, lifting parts, and working with precision under tight deadlines. But Grace had a knack for keeping her spirits high. She'd start every shift with a smile, often lightening the mood with a quick joke or a helping hand. Her co-workers appreciated her focus and her ability to spot potential issues before they became problems. Grace wasn't just assembling cars, she was contributing to a future she believed in, one electric vehicle at a time. Grace fits right in with Tesla's culture. The company wasn't for everyone. Elon Musk's demand for discipline and high performance wasn't just a rumor, it was a fact. But Grace didn't mind. She thrived in an environment where innovation and ambition were valued, and she respected how Tesla made opportunities available for those willing to put in the effort. Her colleagues often joked about how she was always on, ready with encouragement or a laugh, even on stressful days. But Grace's outward cheer masked a reality she kept tightly guarded. She was homeless. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Just 2 months earlier, Grace had been renting a modest apartment with a roommate. Then her roommate decided to move out abruptly, leaving Grace scrambling to cover the rent on her own. Despite picking up extra shifts and cutting every non-essential expense, she fell short. By the time her lease ended, she couldn't afford to renew. Rather than letting her financial troubles defeat her, Grace made a plan. She packed her belongings into the back of her old Toyota Corolla, signed up for a gym membership, and started saving every penny of her paycheck. It wasn't ideal, but it was temporary. She told herself this every day. Living out of her car was a balancing act. Each morning, Grace parked in a quiet corner of the Walmart parking lot to avoid drawing attention. She'd grab her neatly packed work clothes from the trunk and head to the nearby gym, where she'd shower and freshen up. She always made sure to style her hair and do her makeup just right, so no one at work would suspect anything was amiss. By the time she arrived to work, she looked every bit the part of a young professional. During her breaks, while others chatted about weekend plans or home renovations, Grace contributed to the conversation with carefully constructed half-truths. If someone asked about her living situation, she'd mention how she was between places or looking for a new spot closer to work. It wasn't a lie exactly, just not the whole truth. She believed in the company's mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, and that belief gave her a sense of purpose that went beyond her current circumstances. Her evenings followed a quiet routine. After her shift ended, Grace would grab dinner, usually something simple like a sandwich or a salad. She'd then drive to a library where she'd spend a couple of hours browsing books or using the free Wi-Fi to research affordable housing options. When the library closed, she'd return to her parking spot at Walmart, slip into the back seat of her car, and settle in for the night. It wasn't easy. Some nights, the sound of passing cars or the chill in the air made sleep elusive. On others, she'd lie awake, thinking about the future, how long it might take to save enough for a deposit, and what her life would look like once she had a place to call home again. But Grace never let those thoughts overwhelm her. She reminded herself of how far she'd come and how determined she was to build a better life. No one at Tesla suspected a thing. Grace made sure of that. Grace had promised herself she would never risk falling asleep in her car at the Tesla parking lot. It was her golden rule, the line she couldn't cross. But that morning, exhaustion won. The previous day had been grueling. A last-minute shift extension had left her drained. By the time she parked her Toyota Corolla that night, the idea of driving to her usual Walmart lot felt impossible. She thought she'd just lie down for a minute to stretch out her back, close her eyes, and breathe. When she woke up, the morning sun was already creeping over the horizon. Grace's heart leaped as she realized where she was. Panicking, she bolted upright, scanned the lot, and let out a sigh of relief. It was still mostly empty. She quickly grabbed her things and sped off toward the gym to shower, determined to erase any trace of her mistake. She had no idea that someone had seen her. Elon Musk wasn't supposed to be in the office that early, but he decided to stop by ahead of his meetings to review schedules and make last-minute adjustments. It wasn't unusual for him to work odd hours. His life ran on an unpredictable clock. As he pulled into the lot, he noticed a car he didn't recognize, parked awkwardly at an angle. Inside, a young woman was fast asleep in the back seat. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe someone stayed late and decided to nap before their morning shift. But as he walked toward the building, something about the scene stuck with him. The woman had looked familiar, though he couldn't immediately place her. Elon shrugged it off, chalking it up to coincidence, and headed inside to focus on his day. Grace's morning went as usual. By the time she arrived to work, her polished appearance and bright demeanor masked any lingering embarrassment from her early mishap. No one seemed to have noticed anything out of the ordinary, and Grace felt a wave of relief. She buried herself in work, handling calls with her usual warmth and efficiency. But the day wasn't over yet. That evening, Grace made her regular stop at Walmart to pick up a few essentials. She always tried to keep her expenses minimal, but tonight she decided to treat herself to a small snack with the few dollars she had in loose change. As she stood in line at the checkout, fumbling with coins, a handful of change slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Embarrassed, Grace knelt to pick it up, carefully collecting every penny. She didn't notice someone watching her until she heard a voice. "Grace?" Her head shot up, and her stomach dropped. Standing a few feet away, holding a basket with a couple of items, was Elon Musk. "Mr. Musk!" she stammered, scrambling to her feet, the loose change clutched tightly in her hand. She was acutely aware of the Tesla uniform she was wearing, the same one she wore daily at work. "I, didn't expect to see you here," she added, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Before she could fully stand, Elon stepped forward and crouched down beside her. "Here, let me help," he said, his voice calm and kind. He began picking up a few scattered coins, handing them to her with a small, reassuring smile. "You don't have to do that, sir," Grace murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, but he waved off her protest. "It's no trouble. Everyone needs a little help sometimes," he replied, meeting her eyes briefly before standing and offering her a hand to help her up. He tilted his head, studying her with a curious expression. "I didn't expect to see you either," he said lightly. "You work on the assembly line, right?" "Yes, sir," she said quickly, "just grabbing a few things on my way home." Elon watched as Grace hurried toward the checkout counter, clutching her loose change like it was more valuable than it seemed. Something about her demeanor struck him. Her usual polished confidence was gone. She looked tired, her clothes slightly wrinkled, her hair not as neatly styled as it had been at work. She wasn't the radiant, smiling Grace he was used to seeing at work. After she paid and turned to leave, Elon bent down and picked up a penny she'd missed on the floor. "Grace," he called softly as she reached the exit. She froze, slowly turning back. Her eyes darted to the coin in his hand, then back to his face. "I'm good, really," she said quickly, her voice tinged with nervous energy. "Thanks for picking that up. You sure everything's okay?" he asked, stepping closer. His tone wasn't accusing, just curious. "You don't seem like yourself tonight." For a moment, she just stared at him. Her usual spark, the one that lit up every call she handled, seemed dim. Grace managed a weak smile, brushing her hands on her pants as if that could somehow make everything normal. "Yeah, just a long day," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "But I'm fine, really." Elon didn't push, but he didn't look convinced either. Grace glanced at the door, mumbled a quick goodbye, and practically bolted out of the store. He watched her leave, still holding the penny and followed shortly after. When Elon stepped outside, he immediately spotted the car parked in the far corner of the lot. The same car he'd seen that morning in Tesla's parking lot. And next to it, to his surprise, was Grace again. She was sitting on the curb, her head in her hands. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Grace?" he said gently. She looked up, startled, her face flushed with embarrassment as she quickly stood, wiping at her eyes. "Oh, Mr. Musk, I didn't realize." Her voice trailed off, and she glanced toward the car as if trying to decide whether to run or stay. Elon held up a hand. "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to explain anything if you don't want to. But if something's going on, maybe I can help." Grace hesitated, her eyes searching his face for judgment. She didn't find any, but the weight of her secret felt too heavy to keep hidden any longer. "I'm homeless," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been living in my car for a couple of months now. I didn't mean for anyone to find out." Elon stayed quiet, letting her continue. "I'm saving up," she said quickly, as if she needed to defend herself. "I just need to get enough for a deposit on an apartment. But it's hard, you know? And I don't have anyone to fall back on." Her voice cracked, and she looked away, blinking back tears. "I don't have parents. They died when I was a teenager. It's just me." The words hung in the air between them. Grace wrapped her arms around herself as if bracing against the vulnerability she'd just exposed. Elon nodded slowly, his expression softening. "It's not shameful to ask for help," he said quietly. "You could go back to—" "I don't have anywhere to go," Grace interrupted, her voice trembling. "That's the point. No family, no roommate. I'm doing the best I can." Her words were raw, unfiltered, and full of frustration that she'd clearly been carrying alone for too long. Elon didn't say anything right away, giving her the space to let it out. When she finally looked at him, tears streaked her face, but there was also a spark of defiance in her eyes, daring him to judge her. Instead, Elon simply smiled. "You're strong, Grace," he said. "Stronger than most people I know, and for what it's worth, this stays between us. It's our little secret, okay?" Grace's breath hitched, and for the first time that evening, she let out a soft laugh, shaky but genuine. "Okay," she said, nodding. Elon gave her a small wave and turned to leave. "Take care of yourself, Grace. You're doing better than you think." Elon Musk discovered his Tesla employee was homeless. For some people, it wouldn't be a big deal, but Elon couldn't get it out of his head. She was too talented, too young, and too full of potential to be sleeping in a car. He decided he couldn't just ignore it, so the next day, she got the shock of her life. Grace's phone buzzed during her shift. It was a message from Elon's office asking her to come upstairs. Her heart sank. She froze, panic bubbling up. Did he change his mind? Was she about to be fired because no one wanted a homeless employee? Swallowing hard, she smoothed her blouse and made her way to the executive floor, her mind racing. When she entered Elon's office, he greeted her with the same calm warmth he'd shown the night before. "Grace, thanks for coming," he said, gesturing for her to sit. She perched nervously on the edge of the chair, clutching her hands in her lap. "I've been thinking about what you told me," he began, leaning forward slightly. "And I just want to say, you don't need to feel ashamed. What you've managed to do, working hard, saving, and staying positive through all of this is remarkable. But it's not right for someone as ambitious and capable as you to be stuck in that situation." Grace blinked, unsure where this was going. Her heart pounded as he continued. "So," he said, sliding an envelope across the desk, "this is for you. It's enough to cover an apartment for the next year. I want you to have a safe place to call home." Her jaw dropped. She opened her mouth to respond, but he held up a hand. "I insist." Grace stared at him, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." Elon smiled. "Just keep being the hard-working, brilliant person you are. Thanks, enough." She left his office with the envelope clutched tightly in her hand, her mind spinning. By the time she reached the parking lot after work, the weight she'd been carrying for months finally lifted. For the first time in what felt like forever, Grace allowed herself to believe it was all going to be okay. With a beaming smile on her face, she whispered to herself, "It's finally over." Why do you think people often feel ashamed to ask for help? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next video.